Welcome to Forgotten Thrones TV podcast. I'm your host, James P. Patterson. Today's episode is brought to you by Forgotten Thrones Media, LLC. Forgotten Thrones Media is dedicated to bringing history to life through books, podcasts, documentaries, and educational media exploring the civilizations, leaders, and battles that shaped our world. If you enjoy ancient warfare, military leadership, and discovering the reality behind some of history's greatest civilizations, you're in the right place. Before we begin, I want to thank every one of you who continues to listen, follow, share, and support the Forgotten Thrones TV podcast. Every episode, this audience continues to grow, and I truly appreciate having you along for the journey. Now, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you've spent your entire life preparing for one moment. From childhood, you've been taught discipline, endurance, loyalty, responsibility. You've trained beside the men for years. You've eaten beside them, marched beside them, suffered beside them, and eventually you've stood beside them in battle. Your identity isn't simply your own. You're a Spartan, and that name means something. Then one day something happens. Perhaps in the chaos of battle, you lose your nerve. Perhaps you abandon your position. Perhaps you survive while the men beside you do not. And when you return to Sparta, you discover that surviving the battlefield was only the beginning, because there were some failures Spartan society didn't easily forget. Your reputation could collapse. Your standing could disappear. The men who once respected you could look at you in a differently. The community that once considered you one of its warriors could treat you as something else. For Spartans, this is one of the most powerful forms of punishment. Now imagine, not execution, not imprisonment, something far as the tremblers. And understanding what that meant reveals something extraordinary about the way Sparta controlled its warriors. Because Sparta didn't rely only on weapons to maintain its legendary discipline. It also relied on reputation, honor, and the fear of losing both. To understand why that worked, we have to understand what reputation meant inside Spartan society. For us today, reputation can sometimes seem temporary. People make mistakes. People move away. People change careers. People start again. But in Sparta, it was different. A relatively small, tightly connected citizen community, the men standing beside you in battle were often the same men you had known for years. The people judging your actions weren't strangers. They were your community, your comrades, your family, your peers. That meant your behavior could follow home. A battlefield failure didn't necessarily end when the battle ended. You couldn't simply walk away and become someone else. You returned to the same society that has spent your entire life teaching you what Spartans was expected to become. And that is where the punishment became powerful. Ancient sources describe serious social consequences for Spartans who carried the stigma of cowardice. Their standing with the community could be damaged. Their relationships with the other citizens could be changed. Their opportunities with Spartan society could become more limited. The humiliation could become visible. Imagine what that meant to someone whose entire identity had been built around belonging to that community. The punishment wasn't simply the other people thought less of you. The punishment was that you could no longer fully occupy that identity. You had spent your entire life building, and this is where the Spartan system becomes fascinating, because it demonstrates something. Every military commander understands rules can control behavior, but culture can control behavior even when no commander is watching. A warrior might fear his commanding officer, but what happens when the commander can't see him? What happens when battle descends into confusion? When dust fills the air? When men are shouting? When formations begin to bend? When instincts tell you to run? Sparta's answer was culture. The warrior carried the expectations of Sparta within him. He knew what the men beside him expected. He knew what his family expected. He knew what his community expected, and perhaps most importantly, he knew what would happen to his identity if he failed. Those expectations, that doesn't mean Spartans never broke. They did. They were human, and history becomes less interesting when we pretend otherwise. But the Spartan system was designed to make breaking extraordinary, costly, and nowhere was that more important than inside the phalanx. Think again about the Spartan shield. A warrior carried it on his left arm. It protected part of his own body, but it also helped protect the warrior standing beside him. That meant your position wasn't yours alone. If you moved, the formation moved. If you panicked, someone else became vulnerable. If you abandoned the line, you didn't simply save yourself, you potentially endangered everyone around you. This changes the meaning of courage. The heroic image of we often celebrate is the individual warrior charging into battle, one man against impossible odds. But the Spartan system was primarily built around protect the man beside you, trust the warrior protecting you, move as one, fight as one, and if necessary, endure as one. That is why cowardice couldn't simply be treated as a private weakness. Inside of a formation dependent upon mutual protection, one man's fear could become everyone's problem. And this brings us to one of the most interesting examples from Spartan history after the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. The story wasn't quite simple. Not every Spartan associates with Leonidas and his force died at Thermopylae. One Spartan named Aristodemus survived, according to the ancient histories. Herodotus and Aristodemus had been suffering from an eye condition and had been ordered away from the final stand. Another Spartan was reportedly in similar circumstances, but the way the two men responded was remembered very differently. Aristodemus returned to Sparta, and instead of being celebrated as a survivor, he faced disgrace. Think about that for a moment. He had survived one of the most famous battles in human history, yet survival wasn't enough to preserve his reputation, according to Aristodemus. Aristodemus became known as Aristodemus the Coward. For a Spartan, that name may have been more painful than any wound he could have received at Thermopylae. But his history didn't end there. 1 year later, at the Battle of Plataea, Aristodemus returned to battle. This time, he fought with extraordinary ferocity. Some ancient accounts suggest he was attempting to erase the disgrace that had followed him from Thermopylae. He died in battle, yet even then the Spartan response was complicated, because courage wasn't simply about charging recklessly towards death. Spartan discipline still demanded control, formation, obedience. The lesson wasn't die at any cost. The lesson was do your duty. And there is an enormous difference. That distinction matters because popular culture sometimes reduces Sparta to just a civilization obsessed with dying gloriously. But Spartan military system needed disciplined soldiers. A dead warrior couldn't hold tomorrow's shield wall. What Sparta demanded was reliability, the expectations that when pressure came, you would remain where your comrades needed you. And perhaps that is the real secret behind the Spartan reputation. It wasn't simply physical strength. It wasn't their helmets, their shields, their spears, or even the agoge. It was the creation of a culture where personally, identity became connected to responsibility. You were expected to be dependable because other people were depending on you. And that lesson extends far beyond ancient warfare today. Most of us will never stand inside a Spartan phalanx. We won't hear spears striking bronze shields. We won't march towards an ancient battlefield. But every one of us will eventually experience a moment when someone depends on us, a family member, a friend, a coworker, a teammate, a community. And in those moments, reputation isn't built by what we say about ourselves. It's built by what we do. When things become difficult, do people know you'll show up? Can they trust you? Your word, can they depend on you? When circumstances become uncomfortable, that is where reputation is actually built. The Spartans took that idea to an extreme. That belonged to their world and their time. We shouldn't romanticize every aspect of Spartan society. It could be harsh, exclusionary, and unforgiving. But we can still study what made military culture so powerful. In legendary battles was something remarkably human. The desire to belong, the desire to be respected, and the fear of disappointing the people who trusted you. Perhaps this is why the Spartan reputation has survived for more than 2,000 years. Weapons eventually rust, armies eventually disappear, empires eventually fall, but reputation can survive long after the people who created it are gone. And that may be the greatest lesson of today's story. Your reputation isn't created during your easiest moments. It's created when pressure tests who you really are. The Spartans understood that actions have consequences, that trust has value, and that once a reputation is damaged, rebuilding it can require far more than words. So perhaps the question Sparta leaves us with us today isn't whether we could have survived the Agoged, or whether we could have stood inside the Spartan shield wall. Perhaps the better question is, when people depend on us, what kind of reputation are we building? Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Forgotten Thrones TV podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow the podcast and share it with someone who loves history. And if you would like to explore the ancient world even further, my books are available on Amazon and other major book retailers. You can also visit Forgotten Thrones TV on YouTube for cinematic documentaries, historical shorts, and stories exploring Sparta, Rome, Macedonia, Carthage, Persia, and the civilizations that shaped the ancient world. Until next time, I'm your host, James P. Patterson. Thank you for listening. Real history, real lessons, timeless impact.